Hey guys, what's going on? It's Chris from 3-Day Weekend. I'm here with the 2020 Pro XP today, and we're doing a 50-hour service on it. And I'm also going to give you reviews and tell you about how I feel about the machine in general. So let's do it. So let's list some of the issues I've come across in the 50 hours. I will say overall it's been extremely good, but there's just a couple of minor things that could be better. The first is actually with the factory winch. So not everybody's going to have this. There's 3 positions for it. There's the high-speed recovery, and then there's free spool, and then there's pull. And I found in freezing cold weather, I cannot physically turn this, partly because of placement and others because it feels like it freezes up, gets ice and snow and everything in there. So I've started the habit of, once I recover it in high-speed mode, I actually just leave it in pull. That way, even if it is frozen, I can use the remote and get this out. It just takes forever to pull it where I want to pull from. The skid plate. I do not like how this looks. See how this hangs down? It just looks bad, and it was like that right from the factory. I wish that it was just held up a little bit better. There's not really much I can do about that, but there is something that I have in the works to take your attention off of it. But we'll save that for another day. The next thing back here, again, it's just a minor thing, but it's not impacting the machine at all, is some of the parts are starting to show some rust on it. And it's kind of a bummer, you know, because it's a new machine and seeing it start to do this, it's kind of a letdown, but what are you going to do? It's very minor, a couple of bolts here and there and a couple of parts, but overall everything is staying in very good condition. Tires are holding up really, really good. Of course, this one came with a 30-inch Carnivores. The front has about 3/32 more tread than the rear, and we all know what that would be from, so we just won't talk about that. Oh, and the clutch. Obviously, that was part of the clutch recall. So this one had to be replaced. Coming over the other side, everything has been good on that. The suspension has been holding together, and I don't ride this very light. Don't let the clean appearance fool you. This thing definitely sees mud. You can see my pipes are coated in mud stains. Not super deep, but it does go in there. It does get dirty, and I would classify my riding as very rugged, rocky trails. Mostly low speed, not a lot of high end, but very, very rocky, very rugged. I'm definitely putting the suspension to work on that trail. And there's a lot of brush. As you can see, I've rubbed that pretty good. Lots of scratches on both sides. A lot of scratches on the door. In fact, this door has a little bit of a rattle to it at times. It's just kind of annoying to me. But you can see all these scratches. It probably doesn't look that bad in the camera, but trust me, they're there. I'm not afraid to stick this thing right down a narrow trail with everyone else, so it definitely gets wear and tear. And then the only other thing I really got is I got into a rock or a root or something. There's a pretty good rub there and a pretty good gouge there and a slice in my tire. But it's not leaking. Everything's holding together. So those are the issues I found. Oh, and then one other thing. The seats are extremely difficult to remove. I found that I have to slide the driver's seat forward and then out, and it'll come out. Otherwise, they don't want to come out. It's very stiff. And 1 out of, I'd say, 10 or 12 starts, it cranks for a really, really long time. It's done that since new. It seems to be fine. So for service, there's certain things the manual tells you to do, and then there's other things that I like to do just as a proactive maintenance sort of thing. So I'm going to show you both, and I'll let you know which one is in the manual, which one isn't. First thing I'm going to check is the bearings and the bushings. Now to check the bearings and the bushings, you just move the tire back and forth. A little bit of pressure. If that bearing is bad, you'll actually feel a little bit of a clunk. And I don't feel anything. And then a little bit more pressure. We'll check your bushings, all of these back here, and I'm watching for play, but it's not clunking, it's not moving. That is in great shape. Now the front tires, you can also move them back and forth, but of course they're going to swing because you could steer. But I'm listening and feeling for any looseness, and everything should be tight. I'm also looking at the steering linkage right here. There should be no play between those two joints. And everything appears to be nice and tight. And you see that little shaft coming out of my steering rack? That is a little bit rusty too. That's one of the spots I told you about. So I'm going to do that same thing on all the tires. Checking for bearings, a little bit of pressure up and down. And then bushings, lots of pressure. And everything feels good. The trailing arms have bushings up in the front. And to do that, I put a lot of forward and backwards pressure. And that is not moving either. We're also going to check the boots on all four, both inner and outer, to make sure there are no tears or anything like that. Oh, yep, more rust right there. Yeah. So I'm repeating the same on the other tires, and then we're going to take the tires off and check the brakes. For the manual, we need to check the brakes. We're looking for pad, and you can see in there I have a substantial amount of pad left on this one, and I feel the rotor. No deep gouges or scratches. They're going to be a little uneven, but overall they're very good. I also look at the lines, make sure that I don't see any wet spots where it might be leaking. Everything looks clean and dry. This pad, pretty much the same as the other side. No scratches, no gouges. Brakes are on the rear are the same. They go up the trailing arm. And in there is the little box. No gouges. Good amount of pad. Last one, good amount of pad. No gouges. Brake lines go up. And nice and dry. No issues there. Next up, it wants us to check the shocks. There should be no play in the bushings. Sometimes you can turn these, especially the rears. That's okay, but we're looking for any clunking, and I'm just pulling down and pushing up on the A-arm, and those are solid. Same on this side. No play there if I move it up and down or up top. On the rear ones, you can actually turn these whole things like that. That's fine. You're just looking for play. Just pulling up on that one, and that's not moving. It's pretty cool when this is all sitting down naturally. There's actually little to no pressure on this at all. If you take that bolt out, it slides right up. So just hanging down, it's pretty much neutral. This one's the same. See, I can move it back and forth. But if I lift up on the rear, there is no play in any of those bushings. Next up is a fuel system. You're supposed to start the ignition, not start the engine. Turn on the ignition and let it pressurize for a few seconds. This is the fuel line coming out of the top of your pump. I'm on the passenger side rear, and then the line goes off the other direction. Up here, the only part you can see, this is our fuel rail right there. We're looking for any wet spots, leaks, or abrasions. The fuel line, once it leaves the pump, comes over here, crosses over right there, around, up through here, behind these other hoses, right to this spot, and then from there, it wraps around and goes into the fuel rail. I do not see any abrasions or any leaking, so we are in good shape there. Next up is the engine breather. You have actually two different breathers. The one on the driver's side is for the transmission. The one on the passenger side is for the engine. As you can see, my screens are nice and clean. No tears, anything like that. And then that goes into the box, down in, into the filter. So that is all clear there. Next up is the throttle pedal, not the throttle cable. Traditionally, you would check the throttle cable to make sure it wasn't binding, But in this model, they have actually switched to drive-by-wire. So this pedal is pretty much just a potentiometer, and you got a few wires coming out of it, and that's it. So the only inspection for this is making sure it goes all the way down, all the way up. It doesn't stick or bind. We are supposed to check the battery terminals. The battery is located under the driver's seat. You can see my terminals are very clean, no corrosion, no acid buildup, anything like that. Next up is the throttle body, which is located right here. We are looking to make sure that this is all sealed up tight and there are no leaks. And everything appears to be in excellent condition there. Shifter cable linkage. This is the shifter linkage right here. Selecting our gears on the transmission. If there was an issue on this, you should already know just from general driving. But this is how you can adjust it if you need to. Mine has not given me any issues, no grinding of gears, nothing like that, so we are good. Drive belt and clutches. We want these cleaned out and checked. Now, I briefly mentioned earlier that this was part of the recall. Long story short, this has been serviced by Polaris. But I did take this apart and blow it out with compressed air. I'll show you a video clip here. It was extremely dusty, far dustier than I ever thought. That was from a day down in a state park in Pennsylvania. So it is a good idea to open this up and blow it out so it's nice and clean pretty regularly. I mean, I was probably at 30 hours when all of that dust was coming out of there. Next, we're inspecting oil lines for any leakage, any drips. You should be able to see if there's any drips on the bottom on your skid plate or leaking on the ground or any wet spots around there, but everything is dry for the oil lines. Also goes up to the turbocharger. We're also inspecting our coolant lines for any wet spots or abrasions. Everything seems good on those. Also checking the coolant level. There is a mark way up top, and that should be full. Intercooler and radiators. We just need to inspect that they are clean and clear. And this one is. Usually mud will start to build up in the corners, especially if you're dipping the nose underwater and then driving through some dust. But that is nice and clear. If you need to get to it a little better, you can push those clips and this whole thing comes out of the way, and then you have clear access so you can get any debris out of there. Do not use a pressure washer, do not scrub it. If you do have some mud buildup, use a regular old garden hose on a medium sort of setting and spray straight into it and flush it out that way. Also, if you're cleaning it out and then you're going to go on a ride very, very soon, make sure you either blow it out with compressed air or let the thing sit and idle and run up to temp and get all that water out of there, because the next time you drive it, if you're in any kind of dust, it is immediately going to fill right up and block your coolant and you'll have overheat issues. We're going to check our front differential fluid level, which is right here. To do that, we're going to need our 8mm hex, medium length extension, and our driver. Looking at the fluid on the end of it, it looks nice and clean. You're accounting for that rubber O-ring right there. And we are peeking in there to make sure that the fluid is up to the bottom of the hole, which this one is. Tighten that back in, then keep your wrench. We're going to the rear. The rear one is located right there. Checking the exact same thing. O-ring stayed on the bolt, and the level is right up to the bottom. So we are perfect there. Another thing I like to check that's not in the manual, but it'll save you some headache later on, is this joint for the front differential. There should be no play in it, which mine does not have any play. That noise you're hearing is just in the differentials. That's fine. These are not greased U-joints, so we'll just need to stay on top of checking those. Same thing in the rear. We have this one coming out. We're just turning it slightly, making sure there is no back and forth play. And that one is in good shape as well. And that concludes our 50-hour service interval on this Pro XP. Now be sure to subscribe to the channel, because I'm just going to keep doing these. Our next service interval is at 75 hours, and that one includes an oil change. I'm also doing some other videos on installing some accessories that I have coming for this. A pretty good list of accessories. So you want to see those, and I'll kind of review each one and see how we feel about it. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on 3-Day Weekend.